Well, Oliver Stone, in talking about heaven and earth, so many now are using this word trilogy. This is the last of a trilogy. Is that a valid way of looking at all three of those pictures? Is that what you call it, a trilogy? And if so, how would you describe the overall structure?
I think trilogy is a definition that was given to it after it was done. In hindsight, it was never intended that way. I just did Platoon about my own experience. It expanded in Born on the 4th of July, a story about a boy in a wheelchair, which I never thought I would have been able to do, actually. And then I never was interested really in a Vietnamese peasant woman's story, and I read the book, and I was fascinated by her story. And in other words, I think I've really grown through these three movies. Each one has taught me another.
Well, even if it is in hindsight, do you see a sort of symmetry now, looking back?
It's amazing. It truly is a symmetry, because they're all forms of the experience. I mean, you know, my infantry one, with Ron, it was Kovic, it was a story of what it was like in America after the war. And then with Lei Lee, it's a combination of both, what it was like in Vietnam during the war and then after the war, too.
Am I touching on one of the things that I think is the greatest thing about an artist is that he or she only later sometimes finds out what they're really up to? Later, you know?
I agree. I think this has been, for me, personally, a great journey. In 1985 or 6, I never would have been, I told you, if you told me I was going to do a movie about a man in a wheelchair and a Vietnamese peasant woman, I would have said, no, there's no way, I'm not that interested. So it shows you that each film is truly an exploration and a growth, and takes you to a place where you never thought you'd end up.
And in such a complex of philosophy and history and politics, it's still the images that come out, and maybe we can track through the images some of the intersections of these ideas. A jet or tongue of red flame arching across the blue sky. You know, the hat being tossed amidst the waves of the grass. What maybe do those two images tell us about war and about the land, if you will?
Well, the land, too. We keep coming back to the land. We use similar shots of the land twice in the movie on purpose, at the beginning and at the end, sort of a bookend effect.
Right.
And actually, the movie ends on the same shot that it begins.
Mm-hmm.
She starts as a little girl, and she emerges as a
middle-aged
woman. We return to the metaphor of the fire, the flame going through a blue sky 3 times in the movie, because that is the sound and the flavor of war. It's an image of war. The hat is, for me, it was an accident. I mean, we were shooting and her hat blew off, and it just beautiful. It was sort of I suppose, a symbol of innocence. It was gone.
A truly terrifying scene. Such distortions as the helicopter hovers over her.
Yeah.
Everything is flattened and almost obliterated. Again, was some of that imagery impossible for you to calculate? When you looked at it, you thought, yes.
No, that one we worked at it. We prepared for that with certain special types of lenses, because otherwise we would have been, the camera, we were right underneath the helicopter, we would have been blown away. It was a very difficult shot to get. We wanted to create the illusion that for her, first time seeing this helicopter, is not a helicopter, it's a dragon. It's a huge monster. There's no parallel to a 4'11" Vietnamese woman when she sees that kind of machinery.
Now, do you think that the viewers and you and critics are far enough away now from Vietnam that we can talk about heaven and earth without maybe getting logged down in politics? It's a film of philosophy and emotion.
I agree.
Is that kind of your agenda now here?
Well, it's a film about people. It's a story of a spiritual odyssey of a woman who plays many different roles in her life. She wears many different masks. She's a beggar. She's a peasant girl. She's a spy for the Viet Cong. She's a rich man's mistress. She's a prostitute. She's an American housewife. She's the mother of 3 children from 3 different men. She's played many different roles, and at the same time, she never loses touch with her spiritual center, which was given to her by her father, but she grows. And by the end of the movie, I think you see very clearly that she has forgiven the people who hurt her. And I think that's the essence of the movie, and it makes it human. It doesn't matter what war, what time, what place, what country. It's truly all people. This is a state of spiritual wisdom that we should seek to attain.
And you were also talking about your own growth. Last question. There is a little bit of Oliver Stone the Jester here. The scenes when she comes to San Diego and the wide-angle lens shots of refrigerators and grocery stores. That's pretty funny.
Thank you. We try to keep it light in some areas, but I think it's the way she saw America. She's only a small person, and Americans are fairly large to her. I talked to many Vietnamese when their immigrant experience was always traumatic when they came to this country. They went through a lot of changes, and they were never used to the amount of food that was wasted and the amount of consumerism that goes on.
It awakens her sense of wonder. We
Yeah.
just are so crass about these storehouses of food.
Yeah.
But for her,
It's a miracle.
it's Alibaba's cave or something, you know?
It's funny that America, since the 70s, has become more Eastern. We're definitely, America's more aware spiritually. We read more books. It's more in fashion. And the East, on the other hand, when I go back there, has become more materialistic and more consumer-oriented. So there's an interesting sort of global blending that's going on between East and West at this point in time.
Yeah. And at this point, we have to halt, alas. Oliver Stone, Heaven and
Thank you,
Earth.
George.
We are both in New York City. I'm John Tibbetts for KCTV5.